to illuminate the often unseen mental health challenges faced by first responders, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and 911 dispatchers by sharing their stories, fostering understanding, and promoting resources for support and healing. We aim to break down stigma, advocate for improved mental health services within the first responder community, and inspire hope and resilience. This is the Weight We Carry podcast.
What's going on, guys? It's Bart with the Weight We Carry podcast, and today we have a special guest, Kelly Mendendorp. She's a clinical social worker and a volunteer firefighter. Kelly, how are you doing today? And thank you for being on.
I'm doing good. I'm glad I could be here. I'm really excited to talk about this.
We really appreciate you stopping by. So, Kelly, if you could, just give yourself a brief introduction, let everyone know who we're talking to.
Mm-hmm. So I try to separate out the firefighting aspect and then just like the education and personal aspect of it. So I grew up in Delaware County. I've been there pretty much my entire life. And I didn't get into the volunteer firefighting stuff until probably, I'd say I usually tell people like 16, I think is around when I got into it. I tried earlier, in at least where I live, you're allowed to join as a cadet at like 14. But when I started talking to my dad about that, he wasn't a huge fan of that idea. So I kind of had to push him for a little bit longer. And then finally, I think I nudged enough and I got in. So my dad has been a volunteer firefighter since, I want to say as soon as as young as he could join. Where he grew up, the town that he grew up in, the fire department was actually directly across the street. So he joined very early on as a volunteer firefighter. And then when he finished high school, he got into being an EMT and a volunteer firefighter. So by the time me and my siblings were around, he was no longer a member at that company. He had joined the one in the town that my parents had moved to. And I just remember growing up and he would take us to the fire department all the time, do the whole, see the trucks and everything. Or if there was like events and things going on, he would bring us up. There's a good chunk of my childhood that I remember spending around the fire company. So sure. I feel like he kind of should have known that probably eventually down the line, something was going to come out of that. So I joined, and at the time, my brother and my dad were already members there too. So I couldn't do a whole lot because you have to take fire school to be able to like do some of the more intense things like going into buildings or being on actual like, car accidents and helping with that kind of stuff. So throughout high school, I did drill, I was at meetings, and I would attend whatever calls that I could, but I really couldn't do a whole lot without having fire school. And since my path that I decided was to go to college, I didn't get to do fire school until later in life. So I kind of took a pause there and I went to college. I went to Widener University originally I started out as a physical therapy major, which I kind of knew was not really it for me, but I had some persuasion in there to get into the medical field because my dad he was a nurse for like 14 years. So he really wanted to see me get into something a lot more stable than maybe psychology, which is what I was talking about. So I tried doing the physical therapy thing. I got through one semester in college, and I just kind of knew it in my heart that this wasn't it for me because one, I was probably going to fail out because I'm terrible at math and science. But two, I wasn't really in it. So I switched majors and decided to go for a bachelor's in psychology and social work because Widener just had a program where you could do both. And once I really started getting into social work and psychology and figuring out what both of those worlds looked like, by the time I got to the end of college, I knew I wanted to get my master's in social work. I wanted to have a more general skill set for working with people because I had a good idea that I wanted to get into school social work, but I wasn't 100% sure what I would be doing. So I figured, let me do the social work thing, see where that goes. So I finished up grad school and I got my master's in like 2015, I think was when I finished. So the plan had been get into the school social work thing. But I couldn't get a job in that immediately out of school because you get hit with pretty much the same thing everybody does where, you need to have a certain amount of experience. And I just graduated from college, so I have zero experience except for
Sure.
internships. So I ended up working at a school district just kind of as like a classroom aide for a while. And I worked in the emotional support classroom. And after about a year there with like nothing really changing, they had an opening for a school social worker, which I applied for, interviewed for, didn't end up getting it. And I was like, all right, we kind of need to make some moves. So at that point, I had my partner at the time was kind of dealing with addiction recovery himself. So I had some personal ties to that population. And there was a job that came through my email from an alumni from my graduate program about working at a methadone clinic. And I was like, all right, I could see myself doing this. I just don't necessarily have that skill set, but I emailed them directly and I let them know that. And they were like, you're interested. You have the empathy for it. We'll teach you the skills. So I shifted gears, got into drug and alcohol world. I did that for maybe like a little over 3 years. And then I'm trying to think, was it during that time or it might have been after when I got back into school social work that I finally had the time to go to fire school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, I think 26 or 27 when I finally went to fire school. That took about like 6 months. I think it was like the summer into the winter. So once I was able to actually do that, then I got much more heavily involved I joined a different fire company in the town that I was living in at the time. The chief that's there, he's known me since I was a kid. So I just kind of reached out to him and was like, hey, I'm thinking about joining. And he was like, yeah, go for it. We could use the help. So that was kind of how I got myself back into volunteer firefighting and then just kind of trying to balance both worlds, basically.
Sure. It all sort of goes hand in hand, as we know, the mental health aspect of it and then the firefighting or whatever public safety realm you land in.
Yeah.
So what did you learn during your time in undergrad and graduate school that started your shift focus forward towards the mental health aspect of everything?
With like just mental health in general or with first responders?
With first responders.
Okay. So truthfully, it wasn't even on my radar when I was in school. When I think about it now, when I started school and I was also I tried to get to the fire department as much as I could for like at least scheduled things where I could make time in my school schedule to kind of come back home because Widener wasn't that far from where I lived anyway. So I would come back for stuff when I could. And I think as I was learning more about mental health, how it shows up, what it is, and then I'm in the volunteer world, I started noticing things where I was like, some of this stuff feels like there's some mental health going on here, but nobody really talks about it. And it's very much just the, push through that stuff. You can't let anything hold you back. Mm-hmm. So at the time, I think I was aware of it, but it wasn't like an interest that I wanted to get into. I was more so focused on doing the school social work thing because it would have meant summers off, winter, spring break, good benefits. And it was a job that I could see myself very easily just retiring from.
Sure.
And that was kind of it. And that's not to say that I didn't want to actually do the work with the kids. I love kids. That was like the first population that I really wanted to work with. But I think the longer I stayed in with the volunteer firefighting and the further I got professionally with the mental health career, I really started noticing that crossover where probably when I joined the second fire company and I just kind of like would sit back some days, like listening to the guys talking and looking around, I'm like, these guys are not okay. Like, we're all acting like it's fine and we're messing with each other and joking and everything, but like that people are like kind of low key mentioning things that are making me think something's going on.
Some dark stuff going on in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, Kelly, you mentioned experiencing burnout while working in drug and alcohol treatment. Can you walk us through what that burnout looked like and how it impacted your own mental health?
Yeah. So the drug and alcohol world, if people have never really worked in it, it can be very different in some ways because I think it's hard for anybody to want to get treatment for their mental health. But then when you're talking about an addiction, when it gets to a certain point, people really do not want to do that. Like in some ways, you almost have to persuade people. A lot of times if they have like the criminal justice system involved, then they get mandated to go and do treatment and things like that. So it's just a very different world from the mental health perspective. Like I said, when I was working with that population, I also had somebody in my own life dealing with that kind of stuff. And on top of that, since I got into that world, a lot of my coworkers were also in recovery. So like one of my best friends is somebody that's in recovery. And it just became more and more personal how important that work was. And the further I got into working in drug and alcohol, like my time at the methadone clinic was good, but it was one of the most challenging parts was just the lack of funding that we had. And like to the point where we were doing a lot of paper charts still and like typing things and hand filing things, which I know is kind of how it was for a long time. But for, me coming out of college where everything you do it on your computer, it was like, wow, like, why are we still doing things this way? And even just seeing the population that was coming in and just knowing that there's just such a lack of resources there, that was really hard. So that job started to burn me out. One, just purely because of the documentation piece. It was really difficult to stay on top of group notes, individual notes, things coming from the doctors and like our medical staff. Literally just finding a chart some days. And I would have to set aside time, like 2-3 hours at a time, just to file things.
Oh, wow.
So part of me really got burnt out just from that piece. I think the other aspect of it was we had it. I was going to say, well, we had like a high caseload, but not that bad. No, honestly, it probably was a high caseload. Like I just didn't have much to compare it to, but I was seeing a lot of clients. They had a lot of needs, and we were just so limited in what we could do. And I think over time that kind of really started to get to me too. So I spent a little bit over a year there and then tried to switch gears to get into just like outpatient addiction recovery treatment. And I switched to, it doesn't exist anymore. It was called Life of Purpose. And if anybody's ever heard of that, they probably know that they got in trouble for committing insurance fraud.
Oh boy.
Which I was unaware of at the time that I switched jobs. And I think it was just a couple months in that one of my coworkers like had mentioned to me, he's like, I'm hearing a rumor that like I think it was like the attorney general might be coming in to like investigate things. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Oh, wow.
He's like, I don't know, like there's just some stuff going on. And he's like, that's just what I heard. I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to hope that that's not true, because I just left a really tough job to come to this job and really have anything lined up that I could just jump again. So sure enough, a couple months into that job, we had the attorney general, like people came in, people in leadership were getting subpoenas. They had to go to court. And then the state basically like shut us down from admitting any new clients. And then gradually we had to kind of start discharging clients out because they were just like monitoring everything. And I very specifically remember there was a day where before things like really started to fall apart, we had a staff meeting where some of the people in leadership kind of like told us, you know, what was going on. And for the clinicians and the people directly working with our clients, we had no idea. So in a way, I was upset because I got pulled into something that was unethical, that I had no clue about and did not want to be involved in. And then on top of that, all I kept thinking was, you know, I have a loved one who easily could have been going through this program.
Sure.
And if I found out this was happening, that they were just kind of revolving door, bringing clients in and out, in and out, in and out, I would want to burn the place down. Like,
Yeah.
It was so messed up how everything was handled. And that is something that has always stuck with me while I've worked in drug and alcohol world is, okay, so don't be so naive to think that everybody's just here to help. There are people out here who are not necessarily here to help. So when that layer got added on top of everything, that definitely significantly affected the burnout piece. And then eventually, as things were like kind of fizzling out, we had to like break down to a much smaller, like we were working out of one of our treatment centers at one point. And then eventually another company came in and bought that company, and things seemed like they were getting back on track. And then all of a sudden I went home on a Friday and my supervisor called me and was like, so they shut the doors, everyone's laid off, they're bankrupt.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, okay. I don't really know what to do with that, but like the writing was kind of on the walls because they kept trying to reassure everyone that everything was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And when people keep doing that consistently, it's like starting to make me feel like things are not fine.
There's definitely not fine.
Yeah.
Everything is not okay.
Yeah. So they shut down. I was like maybe 27 at the time, in the middle of planning a wedding. I had no job. So I was like, this is great. I was unemployed for a couple of months and then finally found, I wasn't sure about this decision, but I went with another treatment center that did inpatient. And I was like, this seems like a better place. Maybe they're doing a better job. This is kind of where my skill set is right now. So let me try to do that. Spent about 5 months there, kind of started getting the ick again about things. And I don't know for sure that they were ever actually doing anything wrong. It's just there were things happening that made me feel like I just don't want to be part of this anymore. Like I can't do this stuff. So I dropped that job after about 5 months and took a pay cut and a job back in like school social work, and did that for a couple years. And then when I finally got my clinical license in 2020, which at that point I was like, all right, so I have my clinical license now, so I can do private practice, and there's a pandemic going on.
Yeah.
I was unsure about doing private practice up to that point, and I was like, well, it kind of sounds like a lot of people could use some help, so I guess I'm going to do private practice. So I took that work on part-time, stayed full-time with school social work, and then as the kids were coming back, I kind of realized that I was doing too much. It was a lot of work. So I went full-time with the private practice because they gave me an opportunity to specialize, and I was like, well, this is the time that, like, if I'm going to do something with first responders, I think it's now. So that's kind of where eventually that
There's
came
the
back
big
into
loop.
play was,
The big
yeah,
loop.
I had the opportunity to do something. So I decided, why not go for it?
Well, thank goodness. Thank goodness. So in 2023, you launched the Emergency Responders Program. What gap did you see in the mental health care for first responders that made you realize something really needed to change?
Pretty much the ginormous gap that there really isn't anything. The only programs that, at least in my area and at that time, that I knew about were, we have like drug and alcohol programs for when, if a first responder needs to go inpatient to detox for 30 days and just kind of get their life back together. We have programs for that where we separate them out and they can kind of work on that stuff with other people that are very similar to them. But outside of that, I think there were definitely like private practice clinicians out there that were doing this kind of work, but you don't necessarily hear about us all that often because it's hard trying to pay for the marketing and everything like that. But it was just the drug and alcohol programs are the only thing that I knew about. And in my head, I'm like, well, I would kind of like to see people before it gets to that point, ideally. Like, can we never have to send emergency responders and first responders to drug and alcohol treatment? I feel like that would be nice.
Right.
And that's, my job is outpatient. We are the lowest level of care. So already being in that position, it just made sense to work from a more like preventative and educational standpoint, but also for stuff that people are already dealing with. As long as it's not something that goes above outpatient, then I can take them on too. And even from like a maintenance standpoint, that even if somebody's been doing well for a while and then you get that one call that just really shakes you again, go to outpatient then, like handle it now. So like I said, things don't get worse later. And I just did not see a lot of programs for that.
I think the big thing that we've heard through and through with other guests is if you take care of the incidences as they come, not let them build up, and we always attribute it to the dam. The dam can only hold so much. It gets the cracks, all the rocks and logs keep on hitting it. And if you take care of those little problems that come up as they come, then the weight's not as heavy. So that dam doesn't burst. So
like with your dental appointments, how you schedule them every 6 months, right? The whole point of doing that is to prevent it from getting to a cavity. That's what I'm aiming for.
Heck yeah. So Kelly, what does the program look like now, and who's it helping, and how are you connecting with responders in need?
So since 2023, it has very much been a gradual evolving program because there wasn't much to really for me to base it off of because there is such a lack of programs like this out there. So it was pretty much just me spending some days sitting there thinking about like, okay, so what do I know from being in first responder world as far as what people need, what are the things that are in the way, and how does outpatient therapy help with that? So at like a very basic level, we can offer individual and group therapy if we have enough people interested in group therapy. But the way that I've kind of made this a little bit more unique is I've had many conversations with my boss where I've told him like, first responders aren't like, I can't just send like flyers, pamphlets, brochures out. Like we can put stuff all over our social media and things like that, but that's not necessarily going to convince anybody that they should come and get help. I need to be out and in front of people. So one of my biggest efforts that I have is I try to go out to fire departments, police departments. I'd like to go out to some hospitals if they would have me. I try to find events in the area that are doing something to support first responders and go out to those. There's a local coffee shop that we have that is owned by veteran and first responders, and they're now holding events with CISM to just give a comfortable place for first responders to go to talk if they want to talk, to learn something about their mental health that they may not have been taught yet. and just to get them connected with people like me who are actually out there doing the work. So I go out into the community for a lot of stuff. And we're also like, we do contract services too, where there's a university that I'm contracted with to see their campus safety specifically. I go out there to do workshops to educate them as well. And just if the chief wants to run ideas by me to try to figure out how to better support his team, he can just kind of call me up or email me and we can talk about that stuff. So I'm trying to make this as accessible as I can, but at that outpatient level.
Sure.
So it's been growing. I am the only clinician right now, but I'm very optimistic that in the next couple of months, we're actually going to have a couple more clinicians, one of which actually has an EMS background and is a therapist. So
Okay.
I'm also trying to find other clinicians like me. Not that that's the only therapist that can work in this program, but it just helps to have other clinicians like that to, like, one, when we do supervision, educate the other therapists. They may not have a background on this. And then two, to just, for people that are really hesitant to reach out to this stuff because maybe they've had a bad experience, make it a little bit easier that, like, I can level with you. Like, I'm not that person. I've been in this too.
Well, whatever resources we have that we can offer you to get your word out, please let us know. You have the email. And like you said, even just sending flyers out if we can get some stuff out, because my networking is that web goes wide, so we can get them out there. Okay. So what are some of the common themes or struggles you hear from responders who reach out to you for support?
I feel like at the end of the day, probably the most common thing is two things. There's something going on, like family wise at home, where maybe there's just conflict with their partner or their spouse, or just conflict as a family as a whole. Or another one that I hear a lot of times is that people come in, they're like, I just don't feel like myself anymore.
Yeah.
And I've heard that a lot. And that's probably the most heartbreaking one, because I'm sure down the line, for some people, it's like you don't even realize where that change even happened. And then you just get so used to being this other version of yourself that unless somebody who loves you and you have a lot of respect for them says to you, hey, there's something wrong here. A lot of like people can go like that for a long time.
Yeah, I feel I did. I worked in the field for 12 years as an EMT, and I say it now that I'm aware of it. My wife and my son, they deserve this version of me, because it does. It changes you, good, better, worst. Especially specifically for me, EMS, it changed me, and the things that we hear and saw, we're not supposed to see it every day. But luckily, my wife, she has the firefighting and EMT background, so she understood, and then she called me out.
Yeah.
So you're still active in the fire service. I know you said work really takes over in with the volunteer world, but real work gets in the way. And you've held leadership positions like president of the fire company. How does your mental health work inform how you lead in the firehouse community?
It's hard to say with that one, because I feel like a lot of times I'm trying to balance, like, most of the guys, they all know what I do for a living. Like, they know I'm the mental health person, and like they'll make jokes sometimes about, like, oh, I gotta set up an appointment with you or whatever. And I always feel like I have to walk this line where I know it's not all about mental health with some of the stuff that we're doing, but there are so many times where it pops up and I want to be like, hey, there is actually a mental health component to this. Like, can we do things this way to try to work on that? So it's difficult to try to have the two together. But there were some things where I feel like I was able to talk to, like, some of the other people in leadership just to be like, can we try more things to, like, get us to, like, bond? And like at one point we were trying to do dinners before our meetings. It gets hard because there's so few of us that are actively involved and, like, can do those things and follow through on doing those things. So that only lasted for like a short period of time, but that was something that we were doing recently, even though I'm not in a leadership position anymore, because I'm still very much involved in the mental health and first responder world. Anything like when it comes to like policy changes and things like that, or stuff going on with the government, that is actually related to us. One of our representatives, I try to keep up with her pretty regularly, and she'll fill me in on like bills and things that are coming into play. And I'll come back to the fire company and tell those guys about it so that we keep better track of like incidents where there is some kind of critical incident that, you know, people aren't necessarily going to tell you right away that that was something that really bothered me. And now I'm like struggling and I don't really know what to do. Well, there's this bill that's going to be coming into effect where you can go and you can get mental health treatment covered. And that's something that as a fire company, we can keep track of those things so that when you go to seek out that help, that's how we can help you. I know like our fire chief, I think we're lucky in some ways that he may not necessarily openly talk about mental health, but if you come to him, he will talk about it with you.
Sure.
So at least in our fire company, if something's going on, as long as you like get comfortable enough to tell someone, the odds are that we're probably going to help you try to figure it out. We're going to do the best that we can. It helps having somebody like me around because I kind of already know the resources and things like that. But even before I joined the fire company, I know our fire chief was really trying to get connected for situations like that.
Fantastic. That's where it starts. It starts at leadership. That's what
Yeah.
we continuously say about it. And so can you share how PTSD or any other mental health struggles have shown up in your life or the lives of people that serve with you?
So I would say for me personally, knock on wood, and I'm grateful that I don't think up to this point any of the incidents that I've been on have necessarily like shook my world and really stuck with me. There's like two that I can think of. That one of the earlier ones was we had an incident where there's a guy on the roof of like one of these row homes who I'm pretty sure it came out after the fact that he was under the influence of something, but he had like gasoline and was just dumping it across the roofs of a bunch of houses,
Oh, wow.
set it on fire. And there was like a shitload of us that showed up for that fire that night. And we got stuck there for hours because after the fire got put out, they still had to kind of try to get this guy to come down. They were still trying to figure out that whole situation. And that one sticks with me because our fire company, I can't remember what we were assigned to that night. We weren't like up front putting water on the fire. I think we were just kind of like extra support. But I remember standing behind like the police barricades, and there was the one family whose house was in front of them on fire was standing there, and I was like talking to them, and it just sucks. Like just hearing from them, like just how upsetting it is to just, you were probably enjoying your night, not thinking twice about anything crazy happening, and then all of a sudden this fire just breaks out.
Yeah.
And it's like not an accident. This was very intentional, and their whole lives are going to be turned upside down. So I think for me, that one sticks out because I was already in the mental health field. So my head is already kind of like, that's where I go most times with these kinds of things. And I just felt really bad for them because like, yeah, we're here, we're going to help you, and we're going to put this fire out and do the best that we can. But like, man, that really sucks. That.
What about the after effects?
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other one was like, I'm a dog lover or just animal lover, period. And the one house fire that we went to, that one was really sad. We went in and the fire was in the kitchen, and there was a kennel right there that had two puppies in it who they just from the smoke and everything, they were dead by the time that we got in there. And it's weird being in the moment and just kind of like, you can like just a split second acknowledge that piece, but then also be like, all right, but there's something much bigger happening right now. So handle that. Like we pulled them out and everything, and they handed them off to somebody to try to revive them, but they couldn't. And then just take care of the rest of it. And then I don't know if it's good how I separated from that, but like in my head, I was like, okay, so you've grown up with dogs, you own one, like you can very much empathize with this piece, but I don't, the separating from it is weird. That because you know you have to be doing something in that moment where like I can't be having big feelings about this right now. But I think even after the fact, I feel like I did give myself some time to really think about it, because I'm like, that is something that would really bother you. So I feel like I did give it some time that I don't know, some people don't necessarily do. So I don't know how much like I think about that stuff from time to time. I don't know that it really sticks. But I've dealt with anxiety pretty much my entire life. So that's something that I've gotten better with over time through doing therapy myself. Like I very openly admit to people that over the years I've been in and out of therapy for working on that kind of stuff. And even with doing this type of work now, if I notice that I'm really struggling, like I have a shorter temper, or I just am not as patient or feeling as invested in doing my work, that I know it's time to reach out to somebody, that
Sure.
something's going on. I probably don't know what it is, but I got to make time for it. And then as far as like the other part was, how do I see it in other people?
Correct.
Yeah. I feel like the biggest indicator for me is, especially because it tends to be a male dominated world, is anger is, and that's for like a lot of people, not just men, but anger for men tends to be like the easiest emotion to come out. And I feel like as time has gone on, that to me is like one of my first red flags that I see with people is how quick they are to anger, or what things get them that angry tends to kind of get the wheels going in my head, where I'm like, there could be something there with that.
Yeah. So, how do you personally manage your stress? Anything from your vicarious traumas that you've been through and exposure to difficult calls? How do you manage yourself?
Most times I feel like, especially after calls like that, we all tend to just, you stick around afterwards at the firehouse, and we all
Yeah.
just kind of sit around and talk. And at our station, we do have a table in the back. So a lot of times it's just people will kind of just hang out, sit and talk, stand and talk, to kind of like debrief in that way. But I also feel comfortable just reaching out to somebody, or my partner's from the fire company that I belong to. So like him and I will just talk about calls and things like that. Or like my dad, I can reach out to him and talk about this stuff if I need to. I also kind of convinced him to join the same fire company. So now he's there for some of this stuff. But the other thing that I do is, and this has been very on and off for like the last few years, but I like to do long distance running.
Okay.
So I don't exactly know how it helps, but I know when I'm doing it consistently, I think it's an activity that gets my mind to just kind of like slow down and be at ease. Sometimes I use that time to like think through and process stuff. Sometimes I'll have like a song stuck in my head, or I'll be thinking about all kinds of random other things, and then my run's over. And then I feel like reading for me seems to really help with, and like reading specifically about some kind of mental health related thing that like maybe I have a particularly challenging situation with a client that I'm trying to understand. So like researching, finding a book about it, finding podcasts about it, that kind of stuff usually helps like better understand those kinds of things.
As we both know, one of the biggest hurdles in public safety is stigma. What are some of the things that you believe we still need to unlearn or challenge as a culture?
That's actually been something we've been talking about a lot in the fire commissioners group that I'm in, where we've acknowledged that too, that, we could have plenty of resources just sitting there waiting to get used. But if nobody actually wants to use them, it doesn't, like, that's great that that's all sitting there, but it's not
in the
getting
water.
at, yeah, like it's not really doing anything. I forget why I was looking this up recently, but I was like, I feel like if I sat down and really thought about it, like, why don't people get help like sooner rather than later? Part of it, especially with this population, is that you think you can handle it. It's not that bad. And actually, that's for the general population too, that for like part of my caseload that is not first responder. A lot of times when I'm doing an intake with somebody and like asking them why they finally decided to come in, it's like, well, things just like got as bad as they could, basically.
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, I guess I have to do it. So I think part of it is that piece where I feel like people will question themselves about like, is it bad enough for me to go in and get help yet? Which I feel like if you're already thinking about that, the answer is yeah. Like, you can go now. That's fine. Like, nobody's going to yell at you and be like, your problem wasn't bad enough, so we're actually not going to give you any help today.
Yeah.
As soon as you want to work on something, as soon as you feel like something's wrong, you can go and ask somebody for help. Because like I said, the job that I do, we're the lowest level of care. So basically, if you feel like there's something wrong, but I'm not necessarily needing like crisis level intervention, that's fine. I can still help. You don't have to be in crisis to get some sort of help. And there's other levels in between. So I think maybe we need to do a better job of talking about that. I feel like leadership could play a much bigger role in this, where I hear a lot of first responders telling me that like, if my chief, or if, the commissioner, or just somebody above me talked more about these things being available, if they talked about like maybe the fact that they've used them, or that they are helping other people use these resources, because You can send an email out to your whole department saying, hey, we have this thing, but that doesn't mean anybody's actually going to do anything with it.
Right. So what's something you wish every new responder learned about mental health early in their training?
I have like a whole list in my head of things that
I always
I wish
refer
that they
back to
did.
the Nancy Caroline books in EMT class. Like, I think the mental health section is a paragraph, but I
Yeah.
think it needs to be a lot more.
Yeah. Like when I think back in fire school, I don't think we covered it at all. There might have been one day, one lecture for maybe 5 minutes that we might have talked about that part of it. But half the time you're not even paying attention anyway, because it's hard enough sitting through hours of that. And then by the time you get to that part, I feel like people are just kind of writing you off anyway. So I feel like I would want people to know going into this field that it's not a matter of if you are going to experience some sort of trauma, it's when. It's going to happen. Like you're picking a field that responds to the worst of the worst things. That's literally the job. So you will come into contact with something that is not going to sit right with you. And then just going over like there are signs of that, because early on it may not be trauma that you get hit with. It could be depression. It could be anxiety. We could tell people what signs of that are. Like I had a conversation the other day with someone where I was just explaining what anxiety is because they didn't know. And for me, it's so hard to separate from like my therapist brain to think about, like the general public doesn't necessarily think about this stuff.
Yeah.
You're just living. And if you happen to have depression symptoms and that's how you've been living, you're not necessarily going to think to yourself like, oh, that's probably what that is. So I feel like if earlier on we could just tell people like, here are the things that you should look out for. Like, again, going back to like the dentist comparison, where if you start to get pain in your mouth, go and tell your dentist. Like, there's things that we could tell people, and then it'd be like, oh, okay, I'll go get that looked at. And I just wonder how much of a difference that would make.
We would hope it would. Those signs for me were all there. They were there for years. And for me, it was the whole stigma. I'm like, all these people that I work with, they're not complaining about it. So I'm just going to hold it inside and suffer. And I did. And I think beforehand, I already, before I even got into public safety, I think I had some depression, like undiagnosed mental health. And so it just got way worse after the PTSD designation and everything. It just got a ton worse.
Right.
So what kind of mental health resources do you recommend for responders, especially for those who are hesitant to ask for help?
I feel like right now there's a big push for like these programs to get vetted in some sort of way. So through listening to the National FOPs podcast, I learned that they were going through and they were vetting providers. So I, on my own, reached out to them, did an interview with them where I went over my program and everything. And they were able to tell me like, okay, your program meets like the expectations that we have, so that if we were going to refer our police officers to you, we're saying that we feel good about it. So I feel like that's something I would want first responders to know, is that a lot of times right now, you can ask somebody like, hey, has this program been vetted by like a first responder or CISM or something like that?
Sure.
And we can probably find you one. Like I know the CISM team that's in our county, that's something that they've been actively doing, is going to these programs and talking to the people running them and finding out what the deal is with them and what they look like. And if they feel good about it when they leave, they'll keep a list of these are the providers that we would be okay referring people to. Or when somebody has gone through a program and they had a positive experience, like it's a lot easier. Instead of just kind of like referring you to anybody, we can point you in a direction where we know somebody that had a positive experience with it.
Absolutely. Makes total sense. And like we said, this community is so fickle. So they need that reassurance that we're like, okay, these people at least know where we're coming from. And that's what I do hear. And I don't necessarily think it needs to be all the time, but I hear a lot of the people that we've had on, they're like, well, I went to this therapist and they were so appalled and I had to ask them if they were okay, so, and I do believe it takes a while to find that right therapist, but if you find them and then it'll just click.
Yeah.
So
because truthfully, like if I think about it, when I was in school, none of my classes had anything to do with first responders.
Right.
None of them. Like, the only reason I am so comfortable with it is because of my family and my background in it.
Right.
So if I was a therapist without that, it probably would catch me really off guard, some of the stuff that they might talk about.
Yeah.
But it's not fair to send somebody in who like is finally ready to get help, and then you have a therapist that's not prepared for something like that,
Yeah.
because that can
And-
really harm people.
And like you said, with the vetting that you said your program has to go through, and you yourself having that background, we'll send people to you.
Yeah.
If a responder is listening to this and feeling overwhelmed, what would you want them to know or do first?
Just tell somebody that you're struggling.
Yeah.
Like, just let somebody know that it's to the point where you really don't think you're okay. Because even if that person is not part of like a peer support team or on like the critical incident team or a therapist, they more than likely they're going to be concerned about you, and they're going to find somebody who can help you. I tell clients all the time that when they hit a roadblock where they feel like they just don't know what to do, I'm like, just ask literally anyone. Pull a stranger off the street, probably not going to happen, but ask literally anybody you know. And if they don't have the answer for you, the odds are they're probably going to try to help you figure it out, or they're going to point you to the next person who might have a better idea, and
Sure.
you're going to get there. But just let somebody know that something's going on, because nobody wants to see any of our people going through this stuff and feeling like I have no option. There's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. It's like we always say, it's checking on your friends and checking often.
Yeah.
I really think that's super important, especially we said that it starts at compassionate leadership. Leadership needs to know their people. They need to be out on the floor or wherever in the station and know what's going on in their lives if those responders will let them get that personal with them. But even if not, we know the signs. If we have a very talkative person, they're not talkative, or just vice versa. There's subtle signs, and we just be like, dude, are you okay? What's going on?
Right. You
And that's all it
different.
takes. It's all it takes. So, Kelly, we're down to the last question here. Okay. Is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with? Something that feels especially important right now in your work that you're doing?
Probably the number one thing that's been on my mind recently is suicide. And it's such an interesting thing to talk about, because one, a lot of times people are so uncomfortable talking about like anything related to that, like if they have lost someone or if they know someone that's struggling with it, or even for ourselves, that if that is something you're going through on your own and nobody knows about it, I feel like it still is such like a taboo topic in a way, where like I don't want my loved one to come to me and tell me that that's what's on their mind, because like I don't know what to do, and that's obviously a very sensitive topic, and I also don't want to cause any more harm to this person. But I feel like we need to be more open to talking about that stuff and trying to understand that it's not something that just happens overnight. Like, a lot of times this is something that has built up over years. And then when something happens and everyone is like caught off guard, or like some people are still very judgmental about when that happens, that like, I can't believe somebody would do something like that. And, being a therapist, obviously, like, it's a little bit easier for me to talk to people about this stuff because it's part of my job. Like, I have to be comfortable having those conversations. And it just feels like a lot of times we're not giving enough support to people that are dealing with that kind of stuff. So I want people to be more open to having those conversations, to not be so scared that if somebody is talking about that you don't have to have an answer right there in that moment.
Sure.
To help them. Just a lot of times people just need you to listen. And then again, going back to what we were just saying, like, ask somebody else for help that can kind of give you a better direction. But we're losing a lot of people that way. In my area, we lost somebody recently, and it sucks. Like, every time I go to one of these things, and especially doing the work that I do now, it's like, why aren't we doing enough? Like, how are we not getting to these people in enough time to let them know that, like, that we can do something? Like, there's still an option, other we can do something to try and help you, so that you don't have to carry that pain anymore.
Yeah. And that's a tough thing. We see it happen all the time, and it needs to stop. The stigma needs to be broken down. And with people like yourself trying to get to the first responders community, it's hard to do because there is that stigma still associated with mental health and sucking it up buttercup. And that's what we always hear.
Yeah.
But we need to continue this conversation with people and get the word out there that there is the help out there and the resources for everyone to try to understand what's going on. If they're having a problem, please reach out, guys. Kelly, is there anything else you'd like to leave with our viewers, or let them know a little bit more about the program that you have started and where that's going and what other resources are available to them?
So with my program, we're willing to help in whatever way that we can, even if you just feel like your department could use some sort of thing related to mental health, but you don't even know where to start. Reach out to me and we can just kind of talk it through and see, like, is there anything that I can do, or if it's out of my hands, I've connected with a lot of people now through stuff like this and just through the fire commissioner's office, and we'll find somebody that can help meet that need for you. With my program, hopefully getting some more clinicians very soon, it also means that we're going to be able to expand to more areas. So I know I have a couple clients that are very adamant about having an in-person therapist, which makes total sense. You should. So we're able to have such a far reach virtually, but even with in-person therapists, we're starting to be able to expand more too. So right now my office is in Broomall, Pennsylvania. I'm probably going to be moving soon out to like the Chester County area. So then I will be able to do some in-person stuff out there. I have clinicians starting in Broomall. I'm hopefully going to have some that are in like the Philly area. So we're expanding. It's hard because to a certain extent, I kind of have to have a wait list as I'm waiting for these clinicians to come on, but we have people that are coming. And just, again, if people are feeling like they might want to get some help, like just reach out and ask about it. We're probably going to be able to help you to start feeling better sooner than you think.
Heck yeah. We don't want to see our people hurting anymore.
No.
Well, Kelly, we thank you so much for your insight and your expertise. It's been a fantastic interview, getting to know you and learning about more of the program that you're getting out for the first responder community. We thank you very much for being on. And if anyone else would like to be on like Kelly, hit us up at twwcpodcast@proton.me. Then you can be on the show just like Kelly. Kelly, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. And just stick around here for a minute after we finish up. We'll see you guys later. Thank you again.